Today's review is sponsored by Luna because I'm at her house today and she's a good girl. Here you go. Look at those pretty eyes. She only shows up on camera for cookies.
Watch it, Arlen. I'm shooting.
Island of Lost Souls.
What is the law? Not to run on all fours. That is the law. Are we not men?
Happy Halloween, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I'm not in my typical location. As I just showed, I am watching Luna. She's a very good girl. But of course, this being Halloween, I wanted to get another video out to you guys. So, typical disclaimer, I apologize if the audio is off or if the lighting is off. This is just the best location to film in this particular house. But, with that, let's get into it. So, yes, today is Halloween, the day when us horror fans can continue enjoying spooky things. But, hey, let's face it, when you're a horror fan, every day is Halloween.
No TV and no beer make Homer something.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
We all have our traditions for this time of year, and we horror fans have those movies that we like to watch during the Halloween season. For me in particular, I always love watching werewolf movies and horror anthologies around the Halloween season, but particular for me, I like to watch classic black and white horror movies around the Halloween season, especially 1930s horror movies. I don't know what it is, but black and white horror movies always have that feel of Halloween, you know, the classic Universal monster movies and other classic 1930s horror movies. It just always feels right to watch them around Halloween.
It's alive. It's moving. It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
So for this year, I wanted to talk about my favorite 1930s horror movie, Island of Lost Souls. This was the first film adaptation of the book The Island of Dr. Moreau. You also had the 1977 version of Island of Dr. Moreau, the 1996 version, which had a lot of production issues. I guess you could also count Island of the Fishman as an Island of Dr. Moreau movie. It's the Italian ripoff of the book and those movies, and you all know me, I love a fun Italian ripoff. But for me, the 1932 version, Island of Lost Souls, is the best adaptation of that book. I absolutely love this movie.
You spill blood. Here, tell me, spill blood. What is the law? Law, no more.
The film follows a shipwrecked man named Edward. He is rescued at sea after a ship that he was traveling on got shipwrecked. And the boat he goes on is delivering some cargo to a mysterious island run by a man named Dr. Moreau. Now, Edward ends up getting stranded on Dr. Moreau's island because he had a bit of an issue with the ship's captain, and the ship's captain throws him off the boat at the last minute. It's a bit of a mess.
I can't have this man. I can't have him aboard. Oh, throw him overboard. That's what I did.
So Edward is now stuck on Dr. Moreau's island, and he has to wait until someone comes to rescue him. As he stays on the island, he learns that Dr. Moreau has discovered a way to transform animals into people using surgery. All of this is done in a location known as the House of Pain. So now Edward is trapped on this island with a sadistic doctor and this population of beast men.
See! See! Man from sea! Man from sea!
So, Island Island of Lost Souls came out in 1932 during the pre-code era. Now, I did a whole video on the history of the rating system. There's a lot more information there. Please go check that video out. But the gist of it is, from 1934 to 1968, we did not have the rating system that we know today. We had what is called the Hays Code, which was a set of guidelines that filmmakers had to follow when making movies. You weren't allowed to show violence, sex, nudity, drug use, you know, all the fun things that we know and love. But before this era, films had a little more freedom to show these things. This was known as the pre-code era. And while a lot of these films don't get as violent or raunchy as films we saw from 1960 and onward, there was some dark stuff explored in a lot of these movies. The movies that came out during this era, they did do things in a more suggested way, but they did deal with some gruesome and disturbing subject matter. And Island of Lost Souls is one of my favorite movies from this era. The whole idea is Dr. Moreau is turning these animals into people through surgery, and of course there's no anesthesia in the House of Pain. It's really fucked up the more you think about it. There's this one scene where Dr. Moreau has one of the Beastmen strapped to this table, one of his most recent creations, and he's looking over the guy like it's a piece of meat. In many ways, Island of Lost Souls was one of the first body horror movies. Body horror deals with mutations, deformities, and grotesque transformations. Island of Lost Souls is about these animals being transformed into these humanoid creatures. The makeup effects and the prosthetic work is very impressive for the time, and I think it still holds up today.
He can die?
One of the Beastmen is played by Bela Lugosi. Now, the irony of the whole thing is Bela Lugosi had turned down playing the role of the monster from the original Frankenstein because he wasn't going to talk and his face was going to be covered in makeup. But here he is playing one of the Beastmen, and he's a guy with hair all over his face.
You made us in the House of Pain! You made us sing!
But this is a fantastic character. It's a small role, but it's very memorable. All the Beastmen look great. The head makeup artist for this film was a man named Charlie Gamora, and these makeup effects are so good. Charlie Gamora did makeup effects for about 59 movies, and he went uncredited for almost all of them, including Island of Lost Souls. There is no makeup credit for this movie. That's unbelievable to me. Look at some of these crowd shots. There are a lot of Beastmen, and Charlie Gamora had this small makeup team, and they probably didn't have a lot of time to set up all these costumes. You look at these scenes, you look at these Beastmen, it's incredible, especially for 1932. Charlie Gamora deserves so much praise here.
Are we not men?
Now, Dr. Moreau is played by Charles Laughton. He would go on to direct Night of the Hunter in 1955, which is an incredible movie, a fantastic horror film, or thriller as some people would call it, but I think it fits in the horror genre. Anyway, Charles Laughton as Dr. Moreau is one of my favorite mad scientists in horror. It goes Peter Cushing from the Hammer Frankenstein series, Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West from Reanimator, and then Charles Laughton as Dr. Moreau. He's a charismatic villain that you can't help but be captivated by when he's on screen. He's such an asshole, but he's a fun asshole to watch.
Oh, it takes a long time and infinite patience to make them talk.
Someday I'll create a woman and it will be easier.
His god complex is fascinating. He turned these beastmen into humans, in a way getting around evolution. So in his mind, he owns them, creating this messed up dynamic. He turned these animals into people using surgery without any anesthesia, basically torturing these animals in the process of making them into people. He gets this sick pleasure out of ruling over this clan of beastmen that he created through pain.
Mr. Parker, do you know what it means to feel like God?
He does some other messed up things in the flick. It is suggested because it's the 1930s, but you pretty much know what's going on. I won't spoil it here. I'll leave you to figure it out for yourself. One of my favorite scenes in all of horror is when the Beastmen rebel. Now, I do not consider this a spoiler because we pretty much all know this is what it's building up to.
What is the law? Law no more.
Through a series of events, the Beastmen finally turn against Dr. Moreau. Now, Moreau thinks he can get these Beastmen under control because he made them, like in his mind he is their god, but that doesn't go so well, and like I said, they finally turned against him in this amazing scene. It's this terrifying and tragic and in a way triumphant moment since these beastmen are rebelling against their tormentor, but it's this moment when the beastmen realize what they are. There's this law on the island and they're always saying, "Are we not men?" But this is the moment where they realize they're not men, they are what Dr. Moreau made them into, which is beastmen.
Not men! Not beasts! Part man! Part beast! Thing!
And it's just so well done. We cut through all these shots of the beastmen coming at the camera, yelling, "Part man, part beast, we're things, we're things." So many great shots here, and some pretty creepy imagery throughout, and it builds up to a fantastic ending. I absolutely love this scene. It's one of my all-time favorite scenes in horror. Island of Lost Souls is such a good movie. For people who haven't seen a lot of 1930s horror, this one is highly recommended. There is a misconception amongst a lot of younger audiences that old black and white movies are boring, but not really. If you watch especially some of the pre-code horror movies, you'll find some very good, well-paced stuff. Island of Lost Souls is only 70 minutes long, and during a time period when so many people are complaining about how long movies are, it's refreshing to see something that's on the shorter side. Highly recommend Island of Lost Souls, especially to people who are fans of body horror, because this was one of the first body horror movies. And with that, let's get to the Grindhouse rankings. We've got a body count of 6, but the kills don't come until closer to the end. The kills are mostly suggested, but the suggested violence is good. It reaches the body horror requirements with deformed creatures and suggested transformations. Dr. Moreau is a great villain. He has the charm and twisted mind of a classic mad scientist. The makeup effects are so good. All credit to Charlie Gamora, who did an amazing job. The Beastmen are both menacing and sympathetic. You know it wasn't their choice to become what they are, so you can't help but pity them. This being a pre-code movie, it's able to explore some dark ideas. Everything builds up to a fantastic third act that has one of my favorite moments in horror. This is one of my go-to recommendations for people who have not seen 1930s horror. This is a good gateway into those particular movies. I'm giving this a 5 out of 5, a classic black and white horror movie that I recommend for Halloween. As always, I want to thank all of you for continuing to watch and support this channel. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know some of your favorite 1930s horror movies. This is the Maniac and Luna here to wish you a happy Halloween and to remind you that the Grindhouse will never die. Some Halloween belly rubs for a happy dog.